Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Talking Elite Fitness. Sean Woodland, Tommy Marquez, and Brian Friend here with you as Lauren Khalil is on vacation. I believe she's probably in the air right now.
Yeah.
Traveling. But we have a lot to talk about today. Have some stuff that's come out about the games regarding format and equipment. Have another positive drug test, not from a qualifier, but that news continues to trickle out. And then we will have an interview that Tommy and I did yesterday with Justin Medeiros. Some really good insight from him about what happened at semifinals and kind of what he's working on moving forward. Brian has relocated. So you have moved, Brian. How did that go for you?
I mean, it was challenging. I've moved a lot in my life, and I feel like this was up there and one of the more challenging ones. But I'm here, Charlotte, North Carolina. Coached my first class at CrossFit Charlotte last night. It's 17 years as an affiliate, 13 years in the same place. Andy Hendel runs the show over there. Taylor Self's one of the head coaches, and they were very welcoming. I did the 4th of July workout with them, so I'm excited about getting integrated to a new CrossFit community.
That's
for you,
awesome.
Man.
17 years. Yeah.
A gym is old when they have the city name in it. Because didn't they out like that's you can't do that.
Basically,
anymore, right?
you can't do it because it's there's too many now. Like I remember that first you used to be able to have a direction, so there was like CrossFit North.
Yep.
And then there was like
because CrossFit East in Jacksonville was like one of the first or second affiliates, I think.
Yeah, and then they got rid of that, and then it was like, okay, you can't just have just the city. Like CrossFit Chicago would have a huge leg up on the SEO for that one. But that's impressive. That's an awesome gym, and the Hendels are good people. It's cool to see, cool to see this new journey for you, Brian, for sure.
Yeah. Glad you made it safely. I know moving stinks, especially that long of a distance. Like I can't even imagine.
What kind of move was this? Was this a single carload? Was this a rent-a U-Haul? Was this a pod, or load up your buddy and send him on his way type move? There's different levels.
Yeah, we debated a few different options. I ended up shipping my car ahead of time, renting the U-Haul, packing that up, driving it down, unloading it, and the car was here waiting. So it was all right. The drive with the U-Haul, I've done those before. And basically I-65 is not a great road for driving on. And you're in a truck, it's even worse. And it was raining a lot. So the drive was a challenge. But, my dad came with me, which was really nice. And, we both have driven a lot. So we managed it, and we didn't, rush it or push the pace of this too much, and just got there when we got there.
That's perfect.
One of like the low key, like, I don't know if it's exhilarating or if it's like, you're minting pennies back behind you with how tight you are when you're unsure with the U-Haul and you get on the highway for the first time.
Yep. And
you have to hit the accelerator. Like, is everything locked down? Or if you take the first turn with the U-Haul, you're like, hold on, baby, hold on.
Yep. And you hear a crash. You're like, uh-oh.
Well, we'll get to that in 300 miles.
Yep. Just that's a future me problem. Well, glad you made it safely, Brian. Let's jump into it today. First thing, some headlines here before we get into our Justin Medeiros interview. Oh, by the way, today's show presented by Podium. More on them in a second. Proud to have them as one of our sponsors. We have a positive drug test that came out. This was Alyssa Wilhelm, who was on the 12th place team out of North America West.
Yes.
And some familiar things popping up here. Yeah.
So this got dropped on the games website on Monday. Basically, July 3rd is the least productive Monday in the history of the United States, given what's coming, a day off and Independence Day is the next day. But they had a simple drug test update. Basically, Alyssa Wilhelm, she was part of CrossFit 8035. They finished 12th at North America West. Provided a sample that contained osterin and metabolites of GW1516. It stated that she's appealing this result. So a little bit different approach than that they had with the last drug test, where we got official announcements and statements towards the back half of it once the appeals were withdrawn and done, and we got announcements from the athlete. This time they just jumped out in front of it, and
that's a little weird.
I mean, they can't. This is a little odd that they would change it, but I know that in the past they have made adjustments to the rulebook that would allow them to do this, so that they can just get the facts out in front. Because also, like, for example, if you are a 6th place team, you would appreciate this announcement sooner rather than later, to know that, hey, there's a possibility we could get that
True.
invite and start making, adjustments accordingly. So I think more information as allowed earlier is better in this instance.
No, I totally agree with you on that
Yeah.
one. All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on that.
But yeah. And like you said, 2 metabolites of GW1516, known on the streets as Endurobol, Ostarine, 2 most prevalent things that show up.
So you guys probably know a lot more about this than I do. That Endurobol stuff, is that something that, and I think the answer the answer here is probably yes to what I'm about to both questions. Is that something that's usually contained within a supplement, like one ingredient of many, or is it something that usually people do exclusively on its own?
Well, usually it's both. The answer is kind of both. Okay. I mean, you can do it by itself. You can buy it.
That's what I figured.
You can buy it on, you can just Google it and still buy it. There are places, because I remember there was way back in the day, just as an experiment, someone went through the process of how quickly you could get something like this shipped to you in the United States. They didn't go through and actually buy it, but they wanted to see what the process looked like to just nail down some timelines and things like that. But they have been, there has been an increasing amount of contamination of supplements that have had things like this or Ostarine in it from manufacturers that produce both, and that's not an excuse or
well, and speaking of
one way or the
timelines, we're within a month of the games now, and it's always the question that people have with the timing of drug results coming back from semifinals being announced, and then the potential, obviously, of backfills following them. And I think that this is maybe a little bit different since it's not a games qualifying team, but that window is constantly shrinking. And for me, it's like, okay, North America West, that was the second week. So we know that some of those results are starting to come back. And, how my logical mind says, okay, so like a week from now, if there's anything from week 3, we should start to hear either rumblings of it or potentially announcements of it if CrossFit's taking a slightly different path with that. And that still only leaves 3-ish, 4 weeks before the start of competition in the case that we do need to have some kind of a backfill. It's a tough spot. It's always, it feels like it's always a really tight timeline and the days are counting down.
Yeah.
Next thing we want to talk about. So these were 2 things that were contained, I believe, in the same email that went out to athletes, correct? And this was regarding cuts and how those are going to work. And then an adjustment to the grip policy, which I'm sure we'll spend more time on that. Okay. Let's start with the cuts. They announced that they're going to cut down to, I believe it's 30 after Friday, 20 after Saturday.
Yes.
All right. So that information is out there. I don't like cuts. I'm not a fan of them. I understand why they do them. I believe at this point, if you have worked this hard to get to the games, you deserve to finish the test. And I like the fact that some athletes in early heats can still have an impact on the race for the top. Because, maybe you get to the final day, and if you're an athlete who's in heat number 1, you get an event that's right in your wheelhouse, you can put up a good score, and that makes things that will affect the race for the podium. With that being said, I do understand why they do it. Yeah, it does. But I understand why they do it. I just don't like it. I just wish everybody could do the entirety of the test.
Yeah, and the other part of it too is does this affect, and I don't know if you saw this or if this was revealed in the email, does this affect scoring tables?
That was going to be my next question, because I can't remember. They have adjusted the scoring table in the past, correct? Or did they stick with the 40?
So
it's been both.
I've actually, with the research I've been doing recently to put out some of the best athletes from previous eras of the CrossFit Games, I've been encountering these situations very directly on leaderboards and when looking at like athlete performances. And, in many cases, going back to the beginning of the CrossFit Games, the margins points wise at the top of the leaderboard, especially podium spots, top 10 spots, they're in the single digits. There's a couple athletes within a few points of each other. And you start to look and you realize that in the early days of cuts, they didn't adjust the scoring table. So the last place person finishing an event with however many people were remaining was getting 60 something points for taking last. Whereas, previously in the competition, if you were last, you'd get a lot less points than that. In more modern times, there have been variable scoring tables, and we've talked about in many different platforms the effect that the changes to the scoring tables have. The most prevalent case and the best case, in my opinion, for why there should never be cuts or changes to the scoring table is without a doubt the 2019 CrossFit Games,
Yep.
where by the time you got to 6 events, there were only 10 athletes left, but each of those 6 events was weighted dramatically differently as the number of athletes in the scoring table started to slide. And we have very specific case studies of athletes like Annie Thorisdottir, who did really well in events 1, 2, 3, and not as well in 4, 5, 6, missing the cut. And athletes on the opposite side of that, like Matt McLeod, who did relatively poorly, 40th or worst on test 1, 2, 3, did great on test 4, 5, 6, and finds himself inside the top 10, having his career year by a landslide. But what we basically know, if we just had everyone do all the tests that year, Annie Thorisdottir would have done much better by the end of the competition than Matt McLeod. But because of the way the scoring table shifted and the cuts were implicated, we had results that, and I don't even think this is an opinion, that skewed the leaderboard relative to the actual fitness of the athletes. And I just can't believe that after the experiment that was 2019, that we're continuing to do this. And I completely agree with you, Sean. I probably agree at a much more extreme level. I am.
We violently agree.
Well, I totally disagree with cuts at the games for the reasons you said and many more. I think that absolutely, if the challenge of getting to the games is hard enough, and I think it's either disrespectful to your own system or insulting to the athletes to not let them finish the competition there. It doesn't create the same weighting for events from beginning to end. It places an importance on the ordering of events. And, we have these kind of black marks of saying, and now we test strength in our history. And it's like, I just feel like we need to be evolving past that and get to a point where it's like, no, the system is robust enough. Everyone who's taking these tests deserves to be here, gets the opportunity to take it. They're all testing the same things against each other from beginning to end. In the build up to the games, I'm going to be putting out a series of stuff where you can see what every athlete is excelling at. What every athlete that comes to the games has the opportunity to show their stuff. And half of those athletes aren't going to get a chance to, because the best thing for them isn't going to come until after they get cut anyway.
Yeah, and I understand if they just stopped at 30, I'd be like, okay, because a lot of times if you go back and look, you often lose, just 10 athletes from, they're either dropping out, injury, so you're really only cutting maybe 3 or 4 people at the end of the day after that. So that to me is not as severe. It's the cut down to 20 that I just don't like.
Yeah. Last year we only cut down to 30. So it kind of fit more in line with that. After cutting to 2021, they cut to 30, I believe, to start Friday. And then after the toes to bar run event, cut down to another 20. So it was a pretty drastic 1-2 punch of trimming athletes. And I wasn't a fan of it. As Brian took some of the words right out of my mouth and some of the notes I had regarding 2019, weighting events differently, essentially giving heavier importance to certain events over the other, and not valuing performance in a way that we have historically have across the board, and in some ways actually undermining CrossFit's own definition of what it means to be the fittest. You also pulled right out, like, as soon as it popped in my head, and now we test strength with in my opinion, might have been the worst tweet or post that I've seen.
Was that from the games?
Yeah, when they post, it was something along the lines of, now that we've found the 10, since we found the 10 fittest, now we can test strength. And it was like, what?
Yeah. Look, I don't think anybody's going to hold up 2019 as like the banner year. No one is. But to be fair, cuts have been going on for a while. I believe they cut down in 2011. I think 2012 had cuts. You can go back. This isn't anything that's new.
For sure. But even then, after a certain point, and it was a similar aspect, a similar reasoning when we were having those discussions back in the day around why they started forcing all team athletes to do all events, is they felt like it wasn't representative of the definition of being the fittest that CrossFit itself wanted to put out there, right? Yeah. We wanted to make sure that everyone took the test And so that everyone had a similar claim across the board. Everyone had a similar impact and potential to impact on the board. From like Brian said, from a statistical standpoint, things were weighted evenly.
Mm-hmm.
That skills and tests and there's ways to adjust if you don't want to weight something the same way. They have found ways to do that through reducing the points values for certain things, like the 50-point events. There are other ways around that. And I think that for a test for a season now that is, if you actually want to count the prep for it and the ramping up for it, is 8-9 months, to give athletes their time to put their fitness on display at the games, I think is an important aspect. And I would really like to revisit this every year to the point where, like, I hope we can see less and less of cuts at the games. Now, are there other factors that play into it, whether it's scheduling, whether it's, time? I mean, there's the logistical things behind things. Yes, that does. But I think ultimately there needs to be discussion and an investigation around how can we make this work and give these athletes the platform that they've rightfully earned for the entirety of this competition, especially if you're going to pull back in other areas.
Yeah.
I mean, on the logistics side of things, we already made a change this year. We've slid the schedule up so that the age group athletes and adaptive athletes can compete earlier in the week, which should open up resources in terms of time and space and facilities for the back half of the individual competition, especially, and team competition on the weekend. And yet that's also the time that we're reducing the field of play. And I know that there are people who've said, like, oh, we can't do the clean event that we did in 2019 with the field of 40 and the snatch event with the field of 40. But we had a pretty awesome show last year with a big field and the sandbag event. Like, you can make it work. If you want to find a solution to those problems, you can find a solution to those problems. And I'm not buying that as an excuse. The only thing that I will say, or the only two positives that I see about the cut systems this year, is that they're announced early so that at least people know that they're happening. So we'll give some credit to that. And that they're not what Tommy referenced from 2021, which is one event and then another cut. At least there's a day of competition between the first and the second cut, which gives that group of athletes a chance to fight for those spots and those points to make it to the final day.
You actually brought up something I was going to bring. I wanted to say before we move on here is I try to look at this like, could there be a financial aspect to this where, like, if we do this, we spend less, in those latter days. And
it could be,
but I was trying to think. You already have the venue. You've already paid for that. Like, the people still have to. You still got to have the people in place to broadcast everything. You're not compressing things into one day from 2 days. So I'd have to ask someone who knew more about that. But maybe that factors into it. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I would like to see, in the very least, stick to 30. Like, if you're like, we have to do cuts and it's
30. Good.
Do 30. I mean, a majority of the field doing the entirety of the competition seems like a reasonable request in that regard.
No, I agree.
The last thing I'll say,
the
last thing I'll say, since Sean brought it up, is that we have had cuts for a long time. And we've had also, because of that, a lot of opportunity to reflect and think about whether these are good decisions or not. And a majority of the community, if not pretty much everyone that I speak to, is opposed to it. And yet this is a decision that the internal CrossFit Games team continues to make. And that is kind of confusing to me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, speaking of confusing, that's a great segue, because the other thing that came out in this this email was that they've changed the rules surrounding gymnastics grips. Now, look, I am 100% fine with the change of this rule. I mean, you look at any other sport and there are plenty of rules around equipment, what you can wear, what you can't wear, what you can use, what you can't. And there are rules like that with CrossFit. And these have to do now with the gymnastics grips. And all they needed to do is refer, like, the way the rule is written is pretty clear. The way it's written is clear. It's like, when attached at the wrist, a gymnastics grip cannot extend beyond your middle finger.
I think they could go a little bit further and just saying with an open palm, like an open hand.
Yeah, right.
Like,
and then you put a picture. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. You put a picture in there of, like, hey, here's what it looks like, and here's how we're going to measure. End of story. That's all you need. That is all you need. No confusion. The problem is, I think in an effort to try to make it more clear, they actually made it more confusing because they showed a picture of what is acceptable, which is, as Tommy said, is a palm with a grip on that doesn't extend beyond the middle fingers. And that's good to go. What they put as not acceptable is now a gymnastics grip wrapped over the bar and extending beyond it. And as Dallin Pepper illustrated in a video, you can have a grip that when you're wearing it does not come to your middle finger. The second you jump up in the bar, it extends. And there's the confusion.
Yeah, because obviously it's no longer sitting flush with your hand, and your hand can fold in upon itself.
Right.
And so it doesn't have the same, I don't know,
it's
relationship.
Science.
Yeah, he also did it in a way that was fantastic with the Pam from The Office meme. They're the same picture. Yeah, this is just a couple things it speaks to. One, this is one of the reasons why I don't like adjustments of this nature, rulings of this nature being changed mid-season. You see a lot unless it's a drastic aspect of player safety that requires, the players union and all these other things to come together and draft an emergency type element. You typically don't see these adjustments on the fly for most major sports programs. There are maybe some when it's like, if it's very clear this is an obvious violation and people are like, doing it. But like, you go back to like the substance and pitching checks that happen in the off season, because you need time to vet this, right? And just to make sure you get the details right. And it'll be one thing, because in the end, I think if you're like, okay, if they had presented it correctly, it would be less of an issue. But this is another example of like the details not being, like the finer points and details either not being correct or being unclear or confusing in a way that is detrimental to the message that you're trying to set across.
You ever play fantasy football, Tommy?
All the time. You know that.
I have been in the same league for over 20 years now, I think. And every year during the season, something comes up. And someone has a point of contention about a topic or multiple topics. And we have a pretty clear policy in place. Everything gets deferred to the off season unless there's a unanimous vote. If something happens in the middle of the season that's so egregious that everyone is like, yes, we absolutely have to change that right now, then we make the change. I just don't see this as one of those things that needed to be changed in the middle of the season. And when we think about more big picture, what's going on with the sport of CrossFit right now, there are enough problems, complications, confusing things, inconsistencies, areas for people to target and complain about the sport. I just don't understand why someone thought this was a critical thing to implement right now. We should be focusing so much on having an amazing performance in terms of great workouts, visually pleasing, digestible. Clear communication to athletes early is great and fine and appreciated. Same thing with fans. Don't throw in unnecessary things if you don't need to. It goes to this big picture thing that I'm always talking about. CrossFit Games team is constantly saying that they have a small team. Make decisions that the small team can support. This is, in my opinion, whether the rule, I don't care about the rule, honestly. Have it or not have it. Why did they feel the need to introduce it right now?
Okay, I'll jump in here, because this is one of those things where the older I get, the more I sympathize with the security guard and skateboarding videos. So I tend to like skew more towards like the authority part of things here. And the only thing I can say is this: if they looked at things that were going on in semifinals, and look, you can go watch video, and there's athletes out there with these grips that are like, nearly dragging on the floor. They're so long.
Yeah.
That does give you an advantage. There are things that you can do with, if you wrap it around, like you can probably lock it better in with your thumb, and that does help prevent grip fatigue. So if you want to have the best test possible, you might want to say, yeah, that might be a problem. So I'm fine with them making that. If they've determined that through semifinals, I'm fine with them making the change. I think they've communicated it enough ahead of time to not cause any huge problems. The problem is like they just err on the side of simplicity. Like you said, Brian, make decisions that a small team can support. Picture, here's how we're going to measure it. That's acceptable. Same measurement over the middle finger. That's not. Don't worry about the bar, anything. It's, I've been in, when we used to cover the NFL, if you go into the locker rooms, they have all this stuff posted, outside the locker room of here's what's acceptable on your uniform. It's a diagram. It is very simple. And I think with this one, they just didn't think it was going to be a big deal. And then they posted something that now they have to clarify. All they have to do is clarify, like, here's the measurement, and then we're done. But it should never have come to that.
Yeah. And again, it's also death by 1,000 cuts too.
Sure.
If this was the first instance of something like this season, I think it would maybe be less of an issue and people would be less willing to like jump on it. But it hasn't been. And there's been other issues of this nature. So it starts to snowball a little bit. And I mean, like I don't think it's like that big of an issue, like you said.
Yeah, no one bats an eye if it's just like if there's like, oh yeah, no question, just measure it, middle finger, great, done. Okay, we'll move on.
But there's also implications beyond that, particularly if you're something like the PFAA and you're trying to establish a set of ground rules that can hold everyone accountable on a year-to-year basis, right? Because and I hate doing this because then you get into like lawyer legal speak, like what sort of precedent does this set? If CrossFit can just, if we're trying to be more collaborative, right? And we're trying to let like the athlete's voice and things like that have a bigger piece. What is this set in the future if you can be like, hey, we're just going to change equipment rules right in the middle of the season?
Not. And I'm as long as they communicate it right and they do it with enough time, I'm fine with that. If they did it like on the floor to be like, hey guys, we just changed our minds, you can't use those. Now that's wrong.
No, but like, did the athletes have any say in this?
I don't know.
And
like, I don't know, but why should they?
Because
I have another
question
is, what about the grip manufacturers? If Sean is in fact right, and there's people using these dramatically extended grips, other manufacturers or sponsors of other people can say, hey, those guys are using these grips to their advantage. Can you guys make some for me that are like that? Because I want to have that same playing field. And now they've gone and invested in creating a product for their athletes that's no longer acceptable, and they've wasted that money. And in the big ecosystem of the CrossFit Games, we know that finances are a real thing. Athletes are trying to make money. Another reason why I don't think there should be cuts. You should have opportunities to showcase your talent if you've made it there. And sometimes a great performance on the last day catches someone's eye and creates an opportunity for an athlete or for a sponsor to work with an athlete. And, I just think that there's these other elements of introducing something like this that there's like, I totally agree with you, Sean. Nothing wrong with the rule. Presentation of it was faulty. And I totally agree with Tommy. I don't think it was necessary at this time.
Yeah. Okay. Everybody's a winner.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's be honest. There are some people walking around looking like they're with their grip lengths, looking like they're.
How long has that been going on?
Yeah. Yeah.
How long has that been going on for? Why are we all of a sudden addressing it now? Did you not know about this?
Because I think someone probably finally said something and said, maybe we should look at this.
I honestly think it's been a more recent thing in like the last couple of years, if I'm being honest, because I think you look at how the evolution of grips coming into the sport started. You had the actual gymnastics grips would have the hook and loop with like the dowel in it, right?
That's like outlawed right away.
Which weren't allowed. But there was still a case to be made about the hand protection element of it. And so a lot of times it came with finger holes. Most of those grips, because you have to be able to fit on your fingers or have some sort of molding to your hand once they're through the fingers, weren't super, super long. Then you had a couple of athletes go, hey, well, what if we just got a slab and I can manipulate it how I want? And I don't have to have my fingers on it. And that's one less thing I have to fiddle with coming off and on when we're doing, mixed modal events and I got to do stuff that's not the pull-up bar. Those started really being a thing in the last couple of years, more like being adopted across the board. And so that's when I think it started to be an issue where you got Wolverine grips over here with his claws extended, dragging on the floor behind him and hopping up and, it's flapping all over the place and you can loop it back around and hook it with your thumb, or, you can kind of be sneaky with it on certain other movements. And I think this is more of a return to normalcy from that regard. But the structure of the implementation and how it was ultimately conveyed is where the issue is.
It's like, this was ball on tee, very simple. And you wound up hitting the tee and grounding into a triple play.
Look, everyone should probably tee off on the first tee with their 5-iron, because that's the safe play. But you get to the first tee box and you hear the big dog barking in your bag and you got to let it eat.
Yeah.
everyone ends up pulling a driver and duffing it. It's easier said than done sometimes, but there needs to be an improvement in that regard.
Okay. Well, we will see what comes out from this, and if there's any sort of direct clarification from CrossFit.
I hope so.
Before we get to our interview with the two-time champ, Justin Medeiros, want to thank our sponsor for today, and that is Podium. They have some great stuff out right now. You can check them out at 321podium.com.
Oh yeah, and we've talked a bunch about the Podium solos, where you can build your own formulas that include the hydrosalt, the fuse, the whey, the beta alanine, which I've been using. I'm not gonna lie, I've been dry scooping it. It's been pretty good. The creatine monohydrate, just to get those tingles faster. And they even have they released recently a stimulant driven pre-workout called Pump, which is pretty nice if you don't want the late caffeine, which is something I know in our old age, Sean, we're getting less and less. But they got some really cool stuff coming down the pipe. As of this past Monday, July 3rd, all orders of $100 or more will receive an official limited run Podium sipper, which is like a double-walled version of a red Solo cup.
Nice.
So it's got a little insulation on it. It's a little bit sturdier, and you can use it to mix your subs and create your own batch, just like I always say, like Brian does at the soda fountain. And then and then they've got some cool collaborations coming down their pipe, but that we'll be able to announce later on. They also had on July 3rd, through their loyalty members, it was available. They had a street parking flavor that dropped on Monday as well. And of course, if they do have some cool wholesale options now for all box and gym owners and affiliates, they can get set up with sample units, swag, physical demo activation stuff for your gym as well. So if you're curious about that, you can head over to Podium and reach out to them to be able to provide some of that stuff for your gym owners if that's something you're super interested in. As always, you can always get a great deal on Podium, getting $10 off your first order or more with code TEF. So if you're curious about testing any one of the awesome supplements that Podium provides, like the hydrosalt or the fuse, or even just Medeiros' signature cookies and cream flavor, since we have them on the podcast shortly, go to 321podium.com and use code TEF, get $10 off your orders of 20 or more. And then of course, if you need to now, you can always go and get it through your local GNC as well.
I need to reorder the hydrosalt. Ran out this morning.
Oh,
had heart palpitations.
Are you sure that just wasn't the 2 scoops of fuse that you put in your breakfast shake?
Could have been, yeah. It could have been. Yeah, check them out, 321podium.com. Big fans of Podium. Go to the website, stock up, use our code. We would greatly appreciate it. Justin Medeiros, you mentioned him. He is a Podium athlete. Tommy and I spoke with him yesterday, and here's that interview now. Let's welcome in the 2-time fittest man on earth, Justin Medeiros. Justin, how you doing today, man?
Oh, doing awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.
Did you have a good 4th?
Oh yeah, it was awesome. We actually were up in Canada like the week leading up to the 4th, so that was pretty awesome. Just hanging out with our coach, and then got back the day before and just kind of had like a slow day at a friend's house, hung up by the pool, relaxed a little bit, watched some fireworks. It was a good day.
I was gonna say, with the mullet, they kind of go hand in hand with some fireworks, but I'm gonna assume that for safety's sake, you weren't maybe lighting off any bottle rockets or anything like that.
Oh no! I took it a little easier on the fireworks side of things this year, but yeah, no, we had a good time.
So we haven't talked to you in a while, actually. Just general question here: how's training been going for you so far?
Oh yeah, it's been going good. It's crazy how different training is. I've found, like, from year to year. It's crazy how much like things change. Like I feel like my lead up to like the 2020 to the 2021 to the 2022 games have all looked like so different, I feel like, but it definitely like at least keeps things interesting. Like it's always fun to like do something new and like keeps the motivation high.
Why do you think it looks different? Just experience?
I mean, I think we're always trying to like get better, try new things. I think if a lot of times people get like stuck in the rut of doing the same thing over and over again, and like it's a balance of like, obviously what we've done the past few years has worked really well, but also like try not to get stagnant and make sure we're still like evolving. I think also with like Boz being thrown into the mix, I mean, I think there's different things that can pop up at the CrossFit games than prior when like Dave was programming. So there's also a bigger emphasis on different aspects of training, especially going into the games where there's so much that can come up. So you kind of got to like choose a path to follow throughout the year. Cause I mean, we train a bunch, but it's still hard to hit everything, you know? So you're kind of trying to make some guesses, like watch some trends in programming and make sure that you're like as prepared as you can be going into the games. But yeah, it's always really nerve wracking when you're making those changes. Like, well, it's like last year went really well. Like, let's just do that again. But no, it's always been really good. I got full faith in the team we got.
And given what you're working on now, how does this stage of training like throughout the year compare to the other stages? I imagine, you know, you have a little bit more narrow scope or a different scope at semifinals versus quarterfinals versus open. I'm curious if games training is just something you like more. I went up to Vancouver a few years ago and got to watch you run sandbag hills with Adam and that kind of stuff. And it just seems like that stuff appears a little bit more fun.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you finally get to like get outside the gym and like you go have like field days out at like the football field where you do sleds and speed agility drills, and like the really advanced gymnastics starts to come out and the odd object stuff. And like, I think all that stuff's just so fun. I mean, going into like the open, quarterfinals, semifinals, and obviously the CrossFit games, like the level of skill and difficulty of like most of the workouts definitely increases. So you got to like spend time on that. I feel like going into those earlier stages, just making sure that like you have a good engine on you. It's more of like that classic CrossFit per se. Obviously, like at semifinals, you get to see some something a little bit more advanced, but for the most part, it's just kind of like that engine work. And going into the games, I mean, there's certain workouts that might not even not have much to do with your engine. It's just kind of like your skill and your ability to like adapt to some of those new like stimulus, I guess, that are going to come up. So I think going into the games, like that's kind of one of the bigger priorities that we have compared to earlier in the year.
You mentioned your Boz now being introduced into the mix as far as programming goes. What are the main lessons you think you learned from just 1 year, well, really less than 1 year of him, programming the season? What were your biggest takeaways from that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard to like find a trend because it's only been 1 year.
Right.
But you kind of see like the games last year, and then you get to see like the open, quarterfinals, semifinals, kind of see how those kind of flow, and what he's trying to kind of like highlight in the athletes. And I think like even going into just looking at the games last year, he looked at like the double or like the crossover was kind of introduced. So and when you heard him talk about it, he's like, this is a basic skill. It was on like the main site, like however many years ago that was. Like it's something that we should be expected to do. So I think he's kind of getting into some like not old school stuff, but things that he believes should be part of like the mainstream of CrossFit that everyone should be able to do. It's like when people try double unders, it's like so hard, but then you go into a CrossFit class and like everybody's doing them now, but your first time doing them is just like so difficult. You're whipping yourself, you want to throw your rope, do all those things. But like once you kind of figure it out, it's almost kind of like riding a bike, you kind of get it. It's not super difficult. And I think like last year, especially looking at the crossover, just an easy example is it's something that I think that's probably going to come up this year. And it's just going to be expected that athletes be able to do it. He kind of dropped that seed last year of like, hey, this is the direction we're going, and it's up to the athletes to like be prepared for that. So I think that's kind of the trends that we're trying to kind of find and kind of see the direction where he's going to go, and try to make sure we're really prepared for that. And I think the newest part of that is like the gymnastics side of things.
And I don't know, it's weird because I think anytime you throw a new skill component in, it puts athletes in a very uncomfortable position because we're so used to seeing you guys excel, right? And be able to figure things out and do well. And I think anytime we see athletes struggle or it has this really harsh response, I'm curious if you saw that behind the scenes with athletes, you felt that yourself in the skill acquisition process, or if that's something that just kind of runs off your shoulder a little bit.
No, I mean, I think there's a lot to that. I mean, I always get super fired up when we see something like that. I mean, ever since I volunteered at the games in 2015, and I think that was like a real special year at the CrossFit Games. I mean, at least to me, but like they threw out like, I think that was the year of like the snail and the pig, and like they had all these like crazy implements that people kind of had to figure out on the spot. And I think that's such like a crucial part of the CrossFit Games. And like, if something like that came up in my training, like, hey, this is a workout, we're doing something we've never done before, like, let's see how it goes. Like, I would be so fired up and excited about it. And that's how I am for the CrossFit Games. Obviously, it's paired with like a buttload of nerves. Like, you got to try to figure this thing out in front of thousands of people. But it's definitely something that I really enjoy, for sure. But I think a lot of athletes and stuff definitely do get frustrated. Like, hey, we look like idiots out there. But I think Boz doesn't really care about that. And I think the thing that he wants to highlight is that, hey, look at this video from 2022 of 5 athletes trying to do single crossovers or double crossovers. Like, it looks pathetic, you know? And I think there's going to be a highlight reel this year of a double crossover workout where there's going to be a multitude of athletes that just look like they're doing double unders, you know? And like, hey, this was introduced last year for the very first time. Like, put in 1 year of work and see where you can get. And I think that's kind of something that I think he really enjoys and wants to kind of highlight and showcase.
It's also very core to CrossFit, right? Like that's the journey that we all go through on skill acquisition, and elite. That's kind of the tie between elite athletes and all of us, you know, at the lower levels of just training.
For sure. Yeah, that's what I loved about CrossFit. I always say there's a million things to work on, and there's things I'm doing in my training that I still can't do that I'm trying to figure out how to do. Like, it reminds me of when I first started CrossFit, you know, like that's why I feel like I never like it's really crazy, like, to sit and think about that. I'm like supposedly the fittest man in the world, you know, like it doesn't make sense because I'm always trying these new things and failing and then trying again and maybe making a little bit of progress. It's just like, there's literally always something, you know, that you can get better at. And I've had that feeling since day one when I started. And I think that's something that I really enjoy, where you got to kind of like sit there and like kind of beat your head against the wall until you can kind of figure it out, you know? And I think that's something that is pretty like painstaking, like in the moment, but that feeling of afterwards when you finally get it is just like awesome.
How do you prepare for those curveballs that get thrown to you at the CrossFit Games in your training? Or can you, I mean, is that just an impossible task?
It definitely feels like an impossible task, like at times. I mean, I think even when Boz wasn't programming, we had Dave and he brought out the freestanding handstand push-ups. And like, I remember when that workout came out, I was just like in the back. We had 40 minutes until call time. It was like deadlifts at 405 and the freestanding handstand push-ups. I spent 40 minutes trying to figure out those handstand push-ups, walked out into the competition floor, and my first deadlift was at 405 on the competition floor. You know, like, you just gotta like sit there and try to figure it out, you know? And I think it's definitely really interesting. And when you're in training, it's just kind of like, I think the biggest part is just putting yourself in that headspace of like being all right to like fail at it multiple times. But like, I always feel like I know that I can do it. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take me to figure it out. And hopefully that time gets shorter and shorter, the more things that you're able to try and do. And like, I think that's a skill that's learned.
Is there, I don't know, some sort of mental confidence that gives you, you know, an edge there? Because I've heard, especially like last year with the sandbag, like athletes trying like that new skill or that new implement and failing consistently in the background and essentially going onto the floor not knowing if they're going to get it. And I'm always curious, where does that translation happen to, hey, I didn't get this in the back, but I'm going to carry myself out in the competition floor? And more often than not, we see them succeeding, you know, whether it's the heavier sandbag that they didn't have. Is there just like a percentage in your head that, you know, hey, when the competition floor is on, I'm going to dial it up and be able to do this?
No, for sure. I mean, I think that sandbag event was like one of the craziest examples of that. I remember being in the back. I was one of the few guys that was able to get the 300-pound sandbag in the back. And in my head, I'm like, dude, once we get to 300 pounds on the sandbag, like, I'm already sitting at top 10, you know, like in my head. And I think we got down to the 300-pound sandbag and it's like 30 guys still left. I'm like, oh shoot, like this is going to be freaking real. And I think that like competition adrenaline is freaking crazy, man. I mean, me and my coach always talk about like, if you can like snatch 285 like in training, like add 10, 15 pounds to that when you step onto the competition floor, because like you never know what's going to happen out there. And I think just like in those moments, like the best competitors like will rise to that occasion.
Do you ever black out from the adrenaline? Like, do you ever finish an event and be like, I don't really know what happened there, but I was just so fired up, and you know the result was good?
I mean, I definitely feel like I'm mentally like always there, but like it's crazy that like surge that you get, you know? Like it's like that feeling of like passing somebody like in the last round, or that feeling of like catching somebody like you know you're gaining on like the whole time, and then when you finally pass them, just like that dump of adrenaline is just insane. And like I think just like that's why being in the race is so important, you know? Like if you get too far behind in a workout, or you start like checking out, like, oh, like I'm not going to win this workout, but like you can still get that dump of adrenaline when you're fighting for 10th place, you know? And I think that's it's crazy, that like feeling that you get. And that's like what's so awesome and special about competition. I think that's why you see certain athletes that aren't the best on online competition, and they can shine when they step out there to in person, because it's really like a totally different game.
Speaking of in-person competitions, let's go back to semifinals. You know, obviously the main goal, get to the next stage, and you did that. I think there were some people that were like, wow, Justin didn't win. That's surprising. What went right for you at semifinals?
Man, I tell you what, like I think going into day 3, I would have said there's a whole lot that has not gone right. I think I was really, really frustrated. I mean, like every time I step onto the competition floor, like the goal is to win. Like I don't like you hear people say like, oh no, it's just going into the CrossFit Games, he wasn't trying to win. Like BS, you know, like everybody should be out there trying to win. And that definitely didn't happen. That doesn't mean it was a failure or I wasn't fit or anything like that. It just means that like there's more to work on, you know? And I think going like throughout that weekend, I was just so frustrated, because like at the end of every workout, it wasn't that like I felt unfit and like I just wasn't in the hunt for the lead. It was just like I feel like I'm fit, but like every time at the end of the workout, for some reason, something happened in that workout that I felt like I wasn't able to represent my fitness on the leaderboard. And that was just like so frustrating, man. Like I couldn't, it was I'm really happy that it happened. It was something that I was happy that I had to deal with and kind of figure out. But like that's what competition is. Like not everything's always going to go right, you know, especially at the CrossFit Games or anything like that. When there's 15 events, like you're crazy to think that you're gonna have 15 events that go perfectly for you. And going into like the last day, I mean, I was like, man, I just need to like, I need to have something. Like I want to go out there and just execute and feel like when I cross that like finish line, like that was what my fitness is. And I think I was able to get that on the last day, which was like a really good confidence boost. And like my mindset at the end of day 3 was really, really good, even though I wasn't where I wanted to be on the leaderboard. But like, it just feels good to have those workouts where it's like, yep, like that was like, that's me. Like, that's the effort that I put in. Like, no reps, clean run through, just like all those things finally came together on that final day. And I think it was really frustrating to not have that in the first 4 or 5 workouts.
Was there a specific example that you can point to where you said, that's an instance where I was perfectly fit, I had a great strategy, but then something just went wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one that really, really got to me was after Linda with the dumbbell bench and the cleans. I was just like you're pretty aware. I think it's a lot of those workouts. I could hear the announcers. I could tell that I was in that lead pack. It was kind of like me, Vellner, Mertens. I think I was just in front of Vellner. Mertens was in front of us. Like that was kind of like the lead pack going into like the back half of that workout. And I was like, you're in that race, you know, like you got that adrenaline, you feel that push. I'm like, I'm gonna freaking catch Mertens, you know, like you can feel it, you know, like this is my time to bury Pat. Like all those things are like going through my head. And I kind of got to that point in that workout to start making that push. And I started getting a bunch of no reps on my dumbbell bench, and I was doing all my sets unbroken. Got to the point, I think it was around like 6, and ended up doing 9 dumbbell bench. Like, because I got 3 no reps, I didn't drop it, but like, it's pretty expensive to do 3 extra reps right then. Because once you get past 6, it's this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can kind of move through it. And I started getting no reps, and then around 5 and 4, I started having to drop my dumbbells and kind of reevaluate what was going on. And then, for one, that takes me out of the lead race, and it's making my workout take a lot longer, which is also frustrating. But then you don't have that adrenaline and like that surge of like pushing to get in. Like, I wasn't chasing anybody, you know, so it's hard to kind of get that fire up. And I think that's one of the things that went really bad in that workout was like, you can get that adrenaline even if you're fighting for 10th place, you know, like I was in the lead, and once I dropped out of that, it got to me pretty good. But yeah, I think that was a really frustrating workout for me, because I crossed the finish line knowing that I could have done so much better in that workout.
And does that have any carryover to the rest of the day? Or once you were able to kind of step away from the weekend and peel back some of the layers of the competition as a whole, were there other things that just simply came up and affected those, like test 4, test 5, when you had the back-to-back snatch events and stuff like that? I'm curious if anything else arose, or was it just simply like, hey, this happened and, you know, the day kind of just started bad and ended bad?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously the goal is always to have no carryover, you know, like I always say, like the high is never that high, the low is never that low. And I think one thing that did really well is like, I think events 1 and 2, I had similar things happen in that. And I was just kind of like, hey, it is what it is. It's competition, like clean it up, you know? And then when it happened event 3, I'm like, okay, like 1 or 2 times is a coincidence. Things happen in competition, but like 3 times, I'm like, hey, like I has to be me that's doing something wrong. Like you can't blame it on everybody else when it's happening that much. And I had to sit down and have a good conversation with my coach Adam about it. I was like, hey man, like I don't know what's happening here. Like I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, but like why is it not like showing up on the leaderboard? And I think that was a really important conversation that we have. He's like, hey, look, if that workout came up again, we'd do it the exact same thing. Like we wouldn't change a thing. And I think just certain circumstances like caused it not to go the way that I wanted it to. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely carryover. I think obviously I try to shake it as quick as I can, and a lot of times it's easier said than done. But like I think I was able to shake that workout going to the next one, not carrying too much into it. And I think even after winning like event 6 is like, it's not like I'm crossing the finish line, like I just won the CrossFit Games and I'm pumped and losing my stuff. Like it's like, hey, like that's what was supposed to happen, you know? Like I expected that, you know? And I think that was just kind of like a good nod. It wasn't like I highlighted that and just freaking was pumped up going into the next workout. I was just like, hey, like that was good execution. That's what was supposed to happen. Like, let's go into the next one. I think after every workout, you need that evaluation of how it went, highlight the good, highlight the bad, and then move on.
You mentioned test 6, and that I remember watching that, and it was you and it was everybody else. And there seemed to be, I don't know if I could be wrong about this, but from where I was standing, it looked like you were competing angry. Like you were like, I've had enough of this, and I'm going to go show people what I'm really all about. What was sort of your mindset going into that? What were the conversations heading into that test that allowed you to perform that way?
For sure. I mean, I obviously, man, I was super fired up going to that one. I mean, I think just one event after the other going into the weekend just was like really frustrating, and I was ready to have like a good performance, you know. And I'll be lying if that workout didn't shake up really well for me. It was by far my favorite workout of the weekend. Just like a lot of new things in it with the wall facing handstand push-ups, the rope climbs. Mm-hmm. I like overhead squats, the pirouettes, like just all that stuff just sounds super, super fun to me. But yeah, man, I was super fired up going into that workout. Like me and I were talking, like, hey, man, like don't be afraid to do touch and go on that first rope climb. Like, let's just freaking let people know like what's going on here. And I think that was kind of that mindset going to that workout. It's like, no, man, we're going full throttle. We're going for the throat. Like we're going to win this thing. And I mean, I felt like I did that in some of the other work and it didn't pan out. But man, I was really motivated going into that last one. And man, it felt so good across that finish line, just being like, yep, that's what needs to happen. Like, that's what should happen. That's what I expect to happen. And I think I remember getting an interview after, like, I didn't expect, like, you didn't have a good celebration or anything. I'm like, no, like, that's what we expect to happen in those workouts. And I think that was really cool to kind of pull things together throughout the weekend and kind of have a performance like that at the end of it.
You're generally a happy dude. Is that like an aspect of your game that you've kind of developed over time to be able to like compete angry like that? I know you wouldn't want to do it all, but to be able to have that like out for blood moment where you can pin your ears back and just let everything go and go for the jugular, is that something you've always had, or are you working on that more?
Oh, I definitely think it's something that, like, I'm super competitive. Like, no matter what I do, I hate losing. You might have a smile on my face, but inside I'm burning, you know? Like, I don't want to, like, no matter what it is, it doesn't matter if me and Ellie are freaking competing against each other in a card game. Like, I want to win, man. And, like, I'm like, yeah, good job. That was a good play, Ellie. But in my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to let that happen again. You know, like, but it's always fun. Like, I do enjoy, like, good competition, but I think in that weekend, like, I do feel like I generally am, like, have a good head on my shoulders. I'm happy, and I feel like when I step on the competition floor, like, I need to be able to flip that switch. But going into event number 6, I felt like the first 5 events, I don't think there was one time where I crossed the finish line with a smile on my face, just because, like, I was so frustrated with the performance that was shown. And it wasn't even for, like, the reason of I felt like it was my fitness. I think it was external factors, but at the same time, like, that's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. That's not who I want, like, how I want to be known. So I think that workout was just, it felt so good to kind of, like, get that, like, monkey off my back and kind of go out there, have fun in the workout, be in control, and just, like, those are the moments, like, why you compete, you know?
You mentioned earlier that it was good that you went through kind of that adversity. Why do you think you needed to experience that?
Just for so many reasons. I mean, you never know what's going to come up at the CrossFit Games, like I said. And I think I've been very fortunate to be towards the front of the pack on the leaderboard at the CrossFit Games kind of from day one. Like, obviously, I might not be in that leader's jersey from event 1, but I always feel like it's in striking distance. And I think that's something that, like, needs to happen if you want to win the CrossFit Games. I mean, if that gets it gets, like, feel like it's getting a little out of grasp, I mean, it's really hard to stay motivated and get back in the fight. And I think, like, there's going to be a time, I don't know if it's this year, next year, 3 years from now, whatever, that, like, I'm going to find myself in the position where I'm not where I want to be, and I'm going to have to make something happen if I want to get back in the fight. And I think that's what training is. That's why I compete. That's why, like, you do off-season competitions, just to kind of, like, learn those things. You're trying to find a weakness that you have to work on, and not every time that's a physical one. And every time that pops up in a open, quarterfinals, semifinals, and off-season competition, it's just like, yes, like, that's what we want in those competitions. Like, oftentimes than not, like, those bad performances are way more valuable than just going out there and crushing it. You know, like, obviously it's nice for the mental game to kind of have that confidence. But it's nice to know what you need to work on to be prepared to win. And I think just finding whatever that is in a win or a loss is super important.
It's funny you mentioned that, because in the most recent documentary that came out, you had a quote talking about I think a certain point in the competition, maybe after the Capitol, and just before you caught Ricky on the lunges in the following event, that it started to feel like maybe he was pulling away. He was close to a 100-point lead, and that was almost like a turning point for you. And obviously, it'd be nice to have the white leader's jersey all the time. The moment of seeing you get it back in your hotel room was awesome too. But I'm curious if there is a difference for you in, like, being the hunter versus being hunted. I know some athletes like being in front. Some athletes like just having that carrot to chase a little bit ahead of them. I'm curious where you fall on that spectrum.
No, I mean, I love being the underdog. In my head, I'm always the underdog. No, like, I really like that mindset. I feel like you got to go out there with nothing to lose, you know? And I think that's, like, an important quality for me to have, because that's just kind of like how I operate. Like, I like when I'm being doubted. I like when people think I'm out of the race or I'm not supposed to do good in this workout, because it's so motivating, you know? Like, it almost like frees up your mind, you know? Because like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, people expect you to do bad. So if you do bad, you do what like people think, but like you have the opportunities to like make them eat their words. And I think that's it's really special to kind of go out there and let like the performance kind of talk for itself. And like going back to last year's game, that's what it felt like. I mean, I think it was, like I said, like Ricky was almost, I was like 96 points or something like that, 94 points, whatever it was. He was in front, and just like every workout, just like he would, even if I had a good performance, he was right there in front of me. And even on that workout, I made up like 3 or 4 points on him. But like in my head, like I just like I just even the leaderboard, you know, like it was
Mm-hmm.
you gotta have those moments to kind of fire you up. And I think that workout was that for me, you know, like okay, I went from 94-point lead to a 91-point lead, but like in my head, like it was like it's freaking possible. Like let's freaking do this thing. And I think that was really motivating in it. And I don't think it was something that like I lost that motivation, but like it's just fuel to the fire, you know, at that point in the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So you now go to the games as, you know, the 2-time defending champion. The target is even bigger on you than it has been in the past. So, you know, you're not going to be the underdog. How do you deal with that pressure?
I mean, I think it's just the same that I always have. I mean, I think uh, it's it's really tough for sure, you know. And I think especially because like I came into CrossFit, like obviously like you want to win no matter like what you do, but like I never thought that would ever be a reality. Like the goal was just to qualify for the CrossFit Games when I first started working with Adam, and obviously the past few years have been absolutely insane. Like I pinch myself that I'm gonna wake up from a dream, you know, sometimes that like it's crazy to say that like I've had 3 years at the CrossFit Games, 3 years on the podium, and was able to stand on top of it twice. Like it's absolutely insane, but like I do it because I love it, and I have the best team possible around me. And I think it's such a cool opportunity to walk out there and kind of like hold that flag and represent like all those people when I'm out there. Cause like I know they're behind me, like no matter what happens. And I think like I win, like I'm going out there to win more so for them than it like is for me, you know, like I don't want to disappoint them. I don't want to let them down. Like at the end of the day, like I'm so happy to be out there and compete. And like obviously I want to go out there and freaking stand on top of the podium, but it's just like it's for those people, because I know all like the hard work and that they've put in to like get me to where I am, from my family to my coaches to just like the whole crew. And I think it's pretty crazy to walk out there and do that. And I think it's just like just like grateful to be out there, you know. And I think that really just frees me up to kind of go out there and just perform, you know, do what I can. And I have a quote like in my gym now. It's just like my best is enough. And I know when I'm doing that every day in my training, like I'm going to be happy with that result on the leaderboard. Like if I can walk away from every workout knowing that was all I had, like at the end of the weekend, like I know I'm going to be happy with the result. And I think that's just super important. Something I remind myself like every day when I'm training.
You mentioned your support system, and I'm curious, you know, it's well known your family shows up big time at every competition. The whole Medeiros clan, you know, whether it's at the campground, at the games, they show out. And you know, your relationship with Adam as a coach is great too, and we've been able to watch that firsthand. I'm curious how maybe they have evolved in their support of you over the years, because it's one thing to be coaching and, you know, supporting your son when he's an up and comer, but it's another when the, you know, is a 2-time champ and the expectations change. And I'm curious what if you've seen any changes in how Adam approaches and how he's evolved as a coach, and how your family has as well.
For sure. I mean, I think for the most part, honestly, I mean, at least from like my family side of things, I mean, they're so supportive. They're going out, they're going like crazy, but like they've done that since like middle school wrestling tournaments, you know, like we always had the whole crew coming out to watch a wrestling tournament that was 2 hours away, you know? So like in a lot of aspects, like things haven't changed, but also like I'd be lying to say like if I don't win this year, like it's it's a letdown, you know, like I'm going out there to win, and anything less than that is not what I'm shooting for, you know? And I think that's something that I have to address and like make it known in my own head that like that's the expectation, that's where I'm at, and that's where I want to be, and because that's what I know I'm capable of, you know? So it's been pretty cool to kind of have that with Adam and Jesse like evolve too, with just we're going out there to try to qualify for the CrossFit Games, obviously in year one. And I know that like going into year number 4 now, it's like the goal is to win, and we all know that. And every step of the way, like that's what we're shooting for. Though that's every decision we make is to make that goal a reality, you know. And I think it's just really cool to kind of have them. And man, it's like it's crazy to see like how just like proud they are, you know. I mean, my coach Jesse, like I said, we're just up there in Canada, and it's just like awesome. Like I don't get to obviously go up there. Like last time I was up there was last year during this time, but like I hop on a FaceTime with him 3 times a week for 2 hour sessions, you know. So I talk to him all the freaking time, but like to go there and be a part of the community, and like it does feel like I'm part of the community when I go up there. Like I feel like I know everybody just because everybody's bought in. I think that's what's super special about Adam's gym and Jesse's gym, just because like everybody's kind of rallying around. I think that's just so cool to kind of have a group like that.
You have a lot of great people in your corner, but you know, other than Ellie, they're not athletes, and they're not out there, you know, dealing with the same thing that you're dealing with. So what's it been like now having her in the mix to, and you know, you guys support each other. So what's it like, you know, being able to lean on each other as you know, go through this process?
Oh, it's so valuable. I mean, I think going into the 2021 season, I'd be lying if I said the lead up to the games was good or fun. It was pretty brutal, and I would like in my head during that time I was like, man, like if this is what it takes to be a games athlete, like I don't know how long I can do this for. And obviously going into 2021 and winning, like obviously that like makes you kind of forget about a lot of that struggle, but like you get back into it the next year and it's just like, man, like this is really mentally taxing, you know, more than anything. But going into the 2022 season, like obviously we had like Ellie was just like part of the team again, and I had a lot of fun going into last year's games. Training was actually going really, really well. I was setting like PRs before the games, where the year prior was like the exact opposite of that. Like
Oh,
just
wow.
hoping I was going to go into the games, not be in the bottom 10, you know? And I think I was like, man, like this all last year going into the games, I'm like, frick, maybe that's what it took though to win, you know? Like I had to be pushing myself that hard and suffer that much in order to be good enough to win the CrossFit Games. And I was really nervous, honestly, going in to the games because everything was going so well, which was like a weird feeling to have. And just to have the result that I did and be able to stand on top of the podium again was super motivating. And I think that's what kind of like made that quote like hit more home to me, is like my best is enough. As long as I'm doing that, like I'm gonna be happy at the result. And I think it's obviously it's a lot more fun to stand on top of the podium when the whole process is fun. And I think that's hopefully something that I can like carry on for the next handful of years while I'm trying to compete at a high level.
And you mentioned, you know, the competitiveness, whether it's a card game, like what other ways do you guys compete? Is I want to know, like, how do you guys stoke the competitive flame there? Is she a card whiz, or is there something that like that in addition to the process in the gym, like, you know, just having that companion outside of the gym to like lean on when you have a bad day or kind of reset and get back to like being yourself again?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I mean, we like yesterday we played spike ball and we're on the same team, and we're even like,
Oh man.
I'm trying to like, hey, so like if you can set me up like this, like better, like we can freaking get them, you know, and just kind of going through everything like that. And I think it's like hard because I want to win no matter what I'm doing, but like it may not look like I'm having fun, but I'm having so much fun. Like I just love that aspect of like competition and tweaking things and having a good strategy, and like all that stuff's pretty awesome. But like I think just we can do things like that, and like right after it's not like anything happened. Like we can go out, like we can talk about strategy, going into a workout, like what my plan is, what her plan is. I tell her she's gonna kick my butt in pretty much every single workout, and she gets mad if I beat her. But like it's pretty cool. She gets so frustrated. She's like, I tell her, I'm like, oh, you're gonna crush this one, and then she gets so mad because sometimes I'll beat her in it. She's like, well, I didn't think I was gonna do well in it, but then you told me I was gonna do well in it, and then you beat me, and it's just like gets all frustrated. But it's all fun and games. It's cool playing those head games a little bit, but yeah, man, it's really fun to be able to like talk about strategy openly and like, hey, like this is what I'm gonna do, and oftentimes like our plans are pretty different just because we have different strengths and weaknesses in a workout, and it's cool to kind of like go back, sit down, talk after the workout, after we're given like 5 or 10 minutes to cool off from whoever won, and then we can just like talk about like what went well, what went bad, and like learn from it. And I think that's super cool. It's crazy. I mean, I think most people, like, we're in a relationship obviously, and like people like see their significant other in the morning, they go to work all day, don't see them, come back in the afternoon, spend some time. The weekend they probably go hang out with their friends, sometimes with or without their significant other. And like, man, me and Ollie spend literally 24/7 with each other. Like, we live together, we train together, which is our work. Like, everything we do is together, and like it's just pretty cool that like we don't get tired of each other, and it's just like nice having that person like kind of like in your corner that can go through this, because the past 2 years has definitely been pretty lonely because there's not too many people that can do this at the level that I want to do it at. And there's a lot of sacrifices that come outside the gym, but when you have to like on your rest day, like, yeah, you get to not do CrossFit, but also you don't want to like go sit outside and like do things in the pool or go play spike ball or volleyball because like you're in the sun, you're getting tired, it's beating up your body. Like, obviously you can get hurt, like all those things. Like on the rest days, like, hey, let's sit on the couch and watch TV, and then it's fun for like a day. You're like, oh, that sounds so nice, but do that for a year, like it gets tiring for sure. But it's nice just having that person that like is going to go through all of that with you.
And so how were you guys able to manage semifinals? Because you both competed on the same week and you're a world away. And then just from a team standpoint, right? Trying to debrief, have strategy, support one another, like that's a pretty daunting task. And how are you able to manage that?
Yeah, I mean, going into competition, I mean, it's definitely an individual sport that we do, and we want to help each other when we can. But like, I'm myself's priority during competition, and she's herself's priority. Like, she's got to do her own thing. Like at the games, like we get different rooms, separate rooms, because I don't want my highs or my lows to like take away from her highs or her lows. It's such a different weekend, and like even in training, like when things go really really well for her, more times than not, they're not going really really well for me, and that's just kind of like it's just kind of like how it is. And it's at the CrossFit Games, like your headspace is just so important. You don't want to like come off like an event win while the other like maybe struggled in that workout, and like if you won, like you want to like celebrate that with your team, but then it might feel like you're rubbing it in the other person's face or anything like that. So it's kind of like good to kind of have that separation when we're in competition, but at the same time, like we're helping each other out. Like obviously it's either men or women that go first, and like whoever goes first is just trying to get as much information as we can for whoever's going second. And in semifinals, it was awesome. Like we have, like I said, the best team around us with Jesse and Adam. And Jesse flew to Australia with Ellie to kind of help her through that whole process, and Adam went with me to our semifinals since they're the same time, which was huge help. Adam was up watching all her workouts anyways, but like as last year, Adam was waking up an hour before each of her workouts so he can run her through the warm-ups and cool downs, talk the strategy, where it was nice having Jesse there where he can kind of take some of that role so Adam's not waking up at 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. for her events.
Dang.
You are now just one of 3 men to win multiple CrossFit Games championships. The other 2 were, they're probably on the Mount Rushmore of the sport. What's it like? You could win 3 now, and obviously still in that company. But what's it like being mentioned with the likes of Rich Froning and Matt Fraser?
It's honestly crazy. Like I said, like the goal to come in to CrossFit was to maybe qualify for the CrossFit Games, and to have the resume that I have, man, I could not compete again, and it's still like a top resume to have in CrossFit. There's not too many people that are going to be able to stand on top of the podium or even on the podium at the CrossFit Games. So it's a huge honor to have. But like I said, there's still so many things that I know I can get better at, you know? And I think that's really exciting about like what's to come. But to be in the mention with them is just insane. Like I like honestly, both those guys, what they've done in the sport is honestly crazy. And to catch those guys would be freaking insane. So just to be mentioned with them even a little bit is pretty awesome. It's just like crazy to think about. And even to call like some of them my friend, which is just like it's super crazy. But man, like that's the goal. Like I'm in competition. Like I want to chase both those guys down, even though I'm not even competing against them. And I think more times than not after a workout, I try to think about how Matt would have done it, or how he would have done it, or what his time might have been. And it's honestly crazy to go back and see. And I watched Rich compete, but obviously Matt was like in the heat of it for me when I was trying to make the games. I watched him so much, so it's really cool to kind of have that comparison and still feel like I'm chasing him, even though he's not even there. But man, it's definitely an honor, and I definitely hopefully I can close the gap even more year after year. You know,
kind of touching on that, and you know, obviously there's a ton of humility that you've always been gracious in showing as well. But how do you flip the switch? Because at some point, you know, you do have to flip the switch. You have to be the 2-time champ. You have to carry yourself like that. Is there something that you do that gets you in that mode so you can look at yourself and be like, yeah, I'm the man and it's time to be that?
Man, I think there's nothing that does that besides when you walk onto that competition floor, you know? I mean, I think when you see the leader's jersey, I mean, I think that's just kind of like what fires you up. Doesn't matter, like even fires you up more when someone else is wearing it, you know? And I think when you're on the competition floor, like it's just when I'm out there, like that's my jersey, and then that's how I view it in my head, and it's just a matter of time until I can put that thing on. And once it's on, like it's not coming off. And that's kind of that mindset that you have to have like going into competition. And then it's the CrossFit Games is crazy, man. It's there's so many ups and downs and curveballs that come with it. But just to go out there and kind of compete and try to showcase that is one of the coolest experiences you can have.
I just got a couple random questions for you. We always like to kind of end with just some fun ones here. Between you and Ellie, who's messier?
I think that's an easy one. That's for sure me. I mean, I definitely I lived on my own for a while, so I had to like the dishes, the cleaning, and like all that stuff was on me. And now that have her, like she takes up some of that responsibility. So when she's not here, I'm like, oh shoot, like I actually got to do my laundry now, you know? Like I almost forget that has to get done on a weekly basis. So it's definitely nice to kind of have her do all that, but I'll definitely take the blame on that one.
You may have already answered this next question, but what is something that you do that you know gets on her nerves?
Oh, man. I think we're pretty good in the house, but in the gym, it's for sure when I tell her that she's going to crush a workout. Like, I don't know why I get so mad. Like, something comes up, and I'm like, oh, man, you're going to crush me in this one. Like, it's so good for you. And I talk about, like, all the things that she's going to crush. And, like, I don't want to say it's a bad habit that I have, but, like, I always talk myself down before the workout to, like, put myself in that, like, underdog mentality, you know? And then if I happen to do well in that workout, she gets so frustrated about it. She's like, you just said you were going to do bad and I was supposed to do good and then you beat me. And just like, it's, yeah, she definitely doesn't like that, but it's all fun and games, at least to me.
Have you ever weaponized that? And I say this like true or false. Have you ever told her she's going to crush a workout knowing that it's going to get under her skin just so you can maybe like, all right, I can snag one here?
Every time I tell her that she's going to crush a workout, I honestly believe that she's going to crush it. But
okay,
she takes it as that, like, when I say she's going to crush it, it means that I'm not going to crush it. And I think there's certain workouts where, like, I feel like I can push her on it. So I tell her she's going to crush it. And then if I'm close to her or anything like that, she's frustrated. But it's definitely really, it makes me, like, It's because like she's honestly like the best in the world at certain events. Like I 100% believe it. When there's certain workouts that come out, like if she had like 3 event wins at the CrossFit Games, it would be no surprise to me. Like I feel like she's fully capable of doing that. Just like being the best in the world or pushing the best in the world at certain workouts. So if I'm able to beat her in some of those things, like it's just like crazy. That's not like it wouldn't mean anything to me if I thought she wasn't good at those things. You know, it's because I think that she is best in the world at them. And if I can push her in it, like I'm fired up about it. So to me, it's a compliment when I tell her it. She takes it as an insult, but it is what it is.
If you're on a road trip with her, who is picking the music?
Me, for sure. I'm normally driving and picking up the music, but I think sometimes that gets on her nerves because sometimes I listen to podcasts and stuff like that, and she just wants to listen to music. Like, hey, I'm driving. I'm listening to what I want to listen to.
All right.
I was gonna say, is that the rule? The driver picks the music or picks what's on the radio?
Pretty much. But I'm always driving, so I don't know what would be the case if things switched.
I'm still trying to convince my wife of that rule. So
yeah, I know.
I'm just trying to pick up pointers on that.
Oh, well, that's all I got. You got one more?
Well, I was curious. We touched on it a little bit, and this is more for, I guess, you specifically. What is, and maybe it's a self-care thing, but what's the thing that you do to like get right? If you had a bad training day, bad training week, whatever it is, like, is there something that you do that can like make you feel like yourself again? Whether it's a movie, a run, a song, anything like that, like what helps you get right?
Honestly, for me, I feel like it's just kind of like, I'd say it's pretty broad, but just like getting outside. Whether it is just like going to the river, jumping into it, shooting the basketball around outside, just kind of like something to like get my mind off it. And I always feel like when I'm outside, it kind of just makes me feel good in general, just being outdoors. And I think just being able to do like some sort of activity like that, I think has always been like super helpful for me. I know if I sit inside and soak on it, like I'm thinking about it over and 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 over again. So I think it's just good to kind of get my mind off of it for sure. And I think just getting outdoors, whatever it is, going on a walk. I don't try to do anything like a run or any type of training because then I get competitive and end up running too hard or doing whatever it is. So I think for me, it's just doing something that like I'm like almost like bad at, but I can just kind of like do it because I'm not gonna like get frustrated or anything like that with it. So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, sure. Nature's a great disinfectant, you know,
for sure.
Justin, thanks so much for taking the time to do this, man. We really appreciate it. I know you're super busy right now getting ready for the games and looking forward to seeing you and the entire entourage in Madison soon.
Awesome. No, thanks so much, guys. Always love talking to you.
Big thanks to Justin Medeiros for taking the time out of his day to do that. And once again, big thanks to Podium.
Oh, yeah, our sponsor for today. Thanks for being the presenting sponsor for that interview. And also, I should remind everyone, they have their summer bundles out right now for the flavors as well. So if you want to do the orange dreamsicle, the summertime lemonade.
That sounds good.
Are you a dream pop? I think I might want to mix these, a little orange and lemonade hybrid.
You're a crazy person.
Get wild with it. Yeah, I've been inspired.
I'm not a big flavor mixing guy.
Yeah, yeah. I see Brian drooling on our call right now. Again, go to 321podium.com. Check out their new flavors for the summertime, as well as some upcoming stuff they got through their collaborations with the community. So 321podium.com and code TEF.
Wanted to just talk about one thing that came up in that interview, and I thought it was, we talked a little bit about it throughout, is Justin talking about semifinals and being disappointed with his overall performance. There were some big, some things there that he was really happy about, obviously his performance in test 6, but saying that this was not a fitness issue, this was an execution issue. And I think he used, was it test number 1
and 3?
Yeah. And Brian, you brought up a really good point earlier when we were just sort of going over this, is that this is really the first time we've seen Justin have execution errors and then not benefit from the errors of others.
Well, in terms of Justin Medeiros' career as a CrossFitter, it's the first time since we've really been looking closely. basically mean it's the first time since
Sure.
his first win. Prior to that, he got third place at the MAC in 2021, and we were like, yeah, that's fine. I mean, he's coming off obviously a great performance in the previous year at the games, but it was a different format of the games. He had some experience prior to that, even going all the way back to regionals. Like, he's been around. He'd won a sanctional over in Ireland, but we were never looking at him with the same scrutiny that we are after he becomes the champion. And when he becomes a champion and we look back at his performance in that year, we say, wow, this was, even though he didn't win very much or at all, this was a really, really good performance. In every event, he executed really well. He goes to Rogue and he wins. He comes back the next year, wins a semifinal, wins the games, wins at Rogue. And like you said, Sean, not only are we looking at his performance and how great it was, and I've written about it and talked about that in terms of execution through these 2 seasons, especially at the games, he's on par with the best in the sport, if not the best we've ever seen at having great execution, not just on a competition as a whole, but within every individual workout. And it's really impressive. Additionally, there are athletes that are challenging him and they're having some of these things not go their way, whether it's a judging call, miscalculation of their own shoulder stamina, just whatever weird things that happen in this sport. What I have come to know and understand explicitly through the time I've spent studying these athletes is that the best athletes in this sport are the ones who can respond to adversity well, because it inevitably happens when you have this many movements, this many variables, this many nuances, this many competitors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to run up against it at some point. Now that's happened to him. Since the time that he's become in the spotlight, this is the first time that he's really had to answer that question. Can he respond to adversity in the same way that some great athletes in this sport have before? I believe that answer is probably yes. I think he alluded to it in the interview that in some ways he feel like this needed to happen to him. And it has those kind of sounding boards of Matt Fraser from 2014 and 15 and Rich Froning from 2010. And even though it's happened after the fact he's won and it didn't happen at the CrossFit Games, it has now happened to him, and he has the opportunity to prove it to himself, his team, and everyone else. But I think he probably would care most about himself that he can do that too.
Well, I think he even started to, right, with test 6 at semifinals when, in the interview, he said it was just time to pin my ears back. And even he told us after, it was like Adam told him, like, hey, don't be afraid to go touch and go with the seated legless rope climbs. Like, don't be afraid to let your butt hit and go right back up and push it here, like to prove something to yourself, because the execution maybe hasn't gone your way, but here's an opportunity where you can just go, and the execution will take care of itself through the effort that you put in. And that also brings back a great point around, like, some, like, not all no reps and tough calls are built equal, right? The timing and location of certain ones can have such a larger impact than we realize even in that moment. He mentioned that he got 3 no reps on the round of 6 dumbbells on Linda. And that is a crucial point in that test when you realize you're 2/3 of the way through almost 3/4 of the way through all the reps in that, with the dumbbells being the limiter. And once you get to that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, most athletes in their mind are going unbroken on that. So there's very little time to actually make up ground on that particular movement. And because of those 3 no reps, and he had to do 9 in the round of 6, he actually had to break those up. So not only was he unable to catch people, he gave up ground when he was in the race and in the fight for one of those top spots. And, like, just little insights like that are huge after the fact. And I'm glad he was candid for it. And it's funny you mentioned the MAC a couple of years ago. The spotlight wasn't on him, but there were moments where we saw him really push. There were a couple times when, and we were all there getting to watch it, where he basically decided, like, hey, I'm supposed to be the best guy here, and tried to push and lead from the front, and Hopper just reeled him in. You go to Need for Speed 2, where he finishes, 7 seconds behind Hopper, and he was leading then. And that was when we started to realize, who's this Hopper guy for real? And then, Tri Wizard Cup, which is another kind of mixed modal one like that they went 1-2 in as well. And Medeiros was leading early, and Hopper clipped him at the line. So we've seen some elements of that, but never at this kind of, like, full strength, full power, I'm the man, white leaders jersey, I believe I can win type stuff. So I'm excited to see the version of Justin we get at the games, and see him, battle, knowing what happened at semifinals, because we also saw him battle back from Ricky last year too, when he was almost 100 points down, and that was some of the good insights that we got from the doc too.
And just one last thing I'll say, and we can move on to PRs, no reps. You have to give credit to the men that beat him too, because as I said, Rosita Bryan, like usually there's Justin benefits from mistakes, whether it's, and Brian mentioned it, athletes overestimating their shoulder stamina, or not measuring a yoke right, stuff like that. And there didn't seem to be any of that at semifinals. Like his competition more or less had it dialed in and didn't make those mistakes that allowed him to take giant jumps up the leaderboard and onto the podium.
Yeah, well, also there are things. You also have to give credit to the fact that Justin often puts himself in places where he doesn't need to take chances, right? Whereas you talk to someone like Pat Vellner, where he knows that there are parts in the weekend that he's going to have to take a chance. You're going to have to maybe gamble on a certain section of a workout, right? Or you know that, hey, this is going better than I thought. Let me see if I can force multiply this good result and make it a great result. And Justin, more often than not, because of his skill set and how he approaches competition, hasn't had to do that. And we got to see a little bit what that looks like when he does at semifinals. And I'm curious if, depending on how the first couple of days go, what that result is going to be like. Now, knowing that someone like Ricky, who we can expect to do well with some of the outside the box stuffs that show up early at the games typically, is no longer there.
Yeah. Okay. Brian, any closing thoughts on that one?
I think it was probably Hopper's win at Triwizard Cup that spurred his love for Harry Potter.
Does he have a love for Harry Potter?
Is that? I didn't know. I didn't realize
he went on. He got into the Harry Potter books pretty late. He read them over the last couple of years, and I just have a little running joke with him about it. So I had to throw that in there.
Right.
Oh man, well, if that's the case, in that situation,
what house would he be in, Brian? You whip the sorting hat on Jason Hopper. Where's he winding up?
I think it'd be a hard sell for anything other than Gryffindor for him.
Okay.
Okay.
There you go.
But then, if that's the case, then who would have been? Would that have made Medeiros Cedric Diggory in that scenario?
I guess so. I don't like to think about it like that, though.
One moment he had his hands on the cup, and the next moment Hopper's carrying him across the finish line. I don't know.
Oh, man.
Okay, let's close this thing out. Let's get the PRs and no reps. Who wants to start with a no rep? You know what? I'll start with my no rep. I'm going to no rep myself for hitting myself with a barbell not only one time last night, but twice. I was doing Grace. I had to get, is what NC fitted program. I'm kind of behind on the programming. Like, all right, I'll do it. I don't have a lot of time. Cracked myself in the throat once on the clean, so now I feel like you get that bruise. It feels like you have an ear infection.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was dropping it one time, didn't get my head out of the way fast enough and clipped the old noggin. So I'm going to no rep my barbell awareness.
I mean, yeah, that's a tough sell too, because usually gripping and ripping at that point. I've got one for sure, and I've got potentially another one, but my first no rep is taxation without representation, because it was Independence Day a couple days ago. And it is a stern reminder that Great Britain blew a 13 colony lead, and
I've never heard that before.
and the United States battled back. And so, to steal a little Ben Franklin quote there, no rep in Great Britain for blowing that one.
All right,
for sure.
Brian, you got a no rep? Moving.
Can I do a hybrid no rep PR at the same time?
Sure, that'll be a good segue into our PRs.
It is acclimating to a hot environment, and I'm gonna no rep it for my move here, because all the workouts I've done here so far have been limited by me trying to make sure I don't overheat. And on the flip side of that, I want to PR the athletes that are finding a way to get into an environment like that early, as many of the BKG, Yona Koski, Gabby McGowan, Henrik Eppelein, and Laura Horvath are over there in Virginia. Similar climate to here. Absolutely miserable, but they will be prepared for that when it inevitably comes in Madison. was talking with Michelle Bazinet, who trains here yesterday, and she goes like, yeah, this feels like what it feels like out there on North Park. She was out there in 2021, and she has the opportunity to train here all the time. Not all the athletes do. Climates that they live in are very different. So PR to the ones that are setting themselves up for success, because if you don't get used to it, it's really, really brutal.
The one benefit of it is your body warms up quickly. The old trick knee doesn't have as much problem as it does in the cold, but at the same time, the other stuff gets
fewer warm-ups
sooner.
and slower times.
There you go. that's right up my alley. What's your PR?
My PR, and I've mentioned it before, is the baseball pitch clock. It was I've been to 2 baseball games in the last 4 days. I went to an A's game on Saturday for my dad's birthday, and I went to a Giants game on July 4th for my best friend Craig's birthday. He's a Yankee Doodle dandy. He was born on the 4th of July, so we usually go to a Giants game if they're in town.
Mm-hmm.
And the Giants game was over in 2 hours and 20 minutes.
That's fast.
And 6 runs were still scored. And the A's game, outside of a couple pitching changes at the end, at 2 hours in, was at I believe the bottom of the 8th. And if you're just talking about like the ease of like, hey, let's go see a baseball game, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like a 6-hour ordeal anymore.
Oh man.
And if you're a man that enjoys a frosty froth wagon, the distance between when they stop selling at the bottom of the 7th and when you can get back to your car to have a wobbly pop is dramatically reduced as well. So
you don't have to have a cool down period as much as you would need. You can keep the engine going.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I don't really have a PR, so I'll pass on that one. I knew I had one. I just forget. But okay.
Well, why don't you PR the love of your dog? That despite the fact that you bonked yourself on the head,
I'll
he was
PR
still
my
there to give you
dog. That's
kisses.
right. Yeah, I'll do that. It's a good one. I'll PR Dozer. Working out with me last night. I got done and he just came right up and he did the whole thing. He puts his paws up on you like this, and then he just started licking me. So I was like, all right, thanks, buddy.
Ooh,
thanks for making me feel better, dude.
I do have another no rep.
Okay.
Our neighbors that were setting off fireworks.
Yeah, no rep to people
like,
with illegal fireworks. Like, God.
I mean, I'd be a hypocrite if I had no rep illegal fireworks, or fireworks that maybe might be frowned upon in your county.
Mm-hmm.
But our neighbors were setting off fireworks till
that's the worst.
After midnight on July 4th, which it's now July 5th.
Yeah,
and some of us had work the next day.
Yeah, that's not cool. Okay. Well, Brian, we're glad you made it safely to Charlotte and glad you're getting acclimated there. Enjoy the humidity. I'm sure you'll be ready for Madison.
Does it make the discs fly differently?
Oh, that's a good question.
I'll tell you what, I played one round here since I've gotten here, and I played so well. I'm not sure if I should play again. I'm just kidding. I'll go play. But I played really, really well, and I don't know if it has anything to do with the climate or not, but it was challenging and fun.
Nice.
I feel like maybe humidity helps it slide out of your hand a little bit.
Maybe, who knows?
I don't know. I
It's
hold on
easier
to the
control.
I always hold on to the disc too long, so maybe it comes out a little bit sooner and helps me.
Okay. That's it for today. Thanks everybody for listening. Got good stuff coming up. Next week we'll have Emma Lawson on. We're also going to have we have him scheduled, CrossFit CEO Don Fall.
Ooh. Sorry, I just realized I have a
community support.
Community support. Sorry. Yeah. We'll add it in later as well. But hold on, let me grab it. So this is a community support fundraising for Team Milo and Miles. So the event dates are actually this weekend, so it's important that the fundraising will still go on. But they're running a 100-kilometer ultra marathon from Lugnor to Avebury. I believe this is in the UK, to raise money for 2 charities that have massively supported this family over the last couple of years. It is being run by Joel Brisk and Simon Davies. Thanks to Simon for sending it out. But they are teachers who originally bonded through CrossFit, and they're supporting a friend, Sam, who, following his 2-year-old son being diagnosed with cancer, they're trying to raise money in support of cancer-based charities all over the UK as well. So Milo was diagnosed with a rare form of adrenocortical carcinoma, which is a certain type of cancer. Otherwise, he was a very chubby and happy baby, and this diagnosis kind of came out of the blue. He went under 8 rounds of intense chemo on Cameron's ward at the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford, as well as 2 major surgeries to remove one of his adrenal glands and I always mess this word up, I'm sorry, metastasis on his lungs. The treatment was unbelievably tough, but somehow Milo managed to be his smiley self throughout, learned how to walk during this time, and all the hospital staff loved him. Sadly, during the treatment, he was diagnosed with a rare genetic condition called Li-Fraumeni syndrome, and subsequently Maria was also diagnosed with the same condition. The condition is a rare mutation of a certain gene, which is a cancer suppressor, which you can kind of see the connection there. It meant that both Milo and Maria are at high risk of developing subsequent cancers in their life and will need very close monitoring going forward. The most recent scan and blood tests for Milo were clear, so they're hoping that things are going to be okay. But obviously, there's a ton of treatment that goes into it before, during, and after, and they're raising funds for it all. One of which is a leading cancer charity for children and young people. Let me just make sure. It's called Young Lives versus Cancer, as well as the George Panzikara TP53 Trust, which is the genetic disorder that the TP53, like Li-Fraumeni syndrome, that's the disorder that they were diagnosed with. So if you want to support this, I know that was a lot. It's a very important fundraiser for them. You can go to Give As You Donate. So it's donate.giveasyoulive.com. And then there's a bunch of fundraising options, but you can search Team Milo and Miles. And it's a photo collection of all of the kids out there. They're fundraising for July 8th and 9th. They've hit their goal, so they're hoping to raise even more. But they're also running 100 kilometers for both Simon and Joel as well. So really good charity, really good cause, supporting, a very, very strong family that have gone through a ton of stuff. So again, giveasyoulive.com and search Team Milo and Miles to support the charity.
And if you have something that you want us to get the word out on, you can send it to me, Tommy, send it to Talking Elite Fitness on Instagram. Include as many details as possible, because we always want to send people to the right spot so they can help. All right, that'll do it. As I mentioned, we have Emma Lawson coming up. We got Dawn Fall coming up. We are efforting Sydney Wells and trying to get her locked down. And pretty soon we're going to be diving into, pretty detailed previews of the 2023 Noble CrossFit Games. So for Brian Friend and Tommy Marquez, I'm Sean Woodland. Take care of each other, be better, and we will talk to you guys next time.